What's going on, YouTube? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Texas Street Stories, where we talk about what happens on these Texas streets. And if you haven't already subscribed, help your boy out and hit the subscribe button. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Robert Delgado, also known as Bad Boy, an original Texas Syndicate. This is an article that was posted in the Prison's Life magazine. I couldn't believe they were finally going to let me in. For weeks, I had tried to arrange an interview with Robert Delgado, a former gang member with the Texas Syndicate. The Syndicate, which originated in 1977, was Texas' most notorious prison gang. They make the Crips and Bloods look like Boy Scouts. I also have tried to interview Texas corrections officials, but David Nunley, spokesman for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice Institution, the division, had denied each request. We feel an article on Texas gangs would be a treat to security, he told me over the phone. You will not get cooperation from us in any way. This article has an anti-gang slant to it, I tried to tell Nunley. Delgado is speaking out against gangs. It was like talking to concrete. Nunley saw fit to prevent me from interviewing gang intelligence officers, Delgado, and other prisoners, all former gang members, against gangs. What are they afraid of? I thought. Finally, with the help from some friends of prison life, Warden West at Styles Unit in Beaumont, Texas, approved an interview with Delgado, and I was in. From the outside, Styles Unit was like every other prison I'd been to in Texas, stark and quiet. In the preceding week, I'd visited 12 other prisons in the Houston-Huntsville area. At Goree Unit, I was followed out of the parking lot by a guard. At LS2, I was detained by the guards while my driver's license was verified. You can't be taking pictures here without proper authorizations, the cop has shouted at me. At most of the prisons I checked out, I got only as far as a guard shack half a mile from the entrance. The treatment I received at Styles was no different. All through, the guard who escorted me to Delgado forgot to check my camera bag and run me through the metal detector. I was also left to find my own way out after the interview without an escort. How many prisoners in that seg? I asked the guard who escorted me to the visiting room. 504. How many of them are gang members? Oh, a whole bunch of them. Most. He led me to a booth facing a closet-sized room separated by a sheet of plexiglass with phones for communication. This was where I was supposed to tape an interview and photograph Delgado. Can't we go into the same room? I asked the guard. Can't allow you near Delgado. He shook his head and looked at me like I asked to have lunch with Jeffrey Dahmer. Come back from the dead. What are you doing with your story on anyway? He asked. Gangs? Well, he should be able to tell you something about that. Yeah, being a former member of the Texas Syndicate and all. Former? We believe Mr. Delgado, the number 2 man for the Texas Syndicate. Do you know he's speaking out against gangs? I asked. Gang members have that rule, he said, nodding his authoritatively. Once you're in for life. So he must be lying. Open war on gangs. In 1985, TDCJ spokesman Phil Gutierrez estimated that 750 of the system's 38,000 prisoners in the 26-unit system belonged to one of half a dozen gangs: the Texas Syndicate, Mexican Mafia, Texas Aryan Brotherhood, Texas Mafia, Mandingo Warriors, Nuestros Carnales, Raza Unida, and Hermanos de Pistoleros Latinos. All but the Texas Syndicate were new to Texas. The Syndicate had originated in 1977 to fight the building tender system. Building tenders were selected inmates turned guards authorized by the state to carry weapons and order other prisoners around. Once the building system was abolished in 1983, other gangs formed to fill the power vacuum. Much of the tension between the Syndicate and the Mexican Mafia, but other gangs joined the power struggle. In September 1983, after a triple homicide at the Darrington unit, the Department of Corrections declared open war on gangs. A lockdown was enforced at all maximum and medium security joints for 3 days while prisoners were confined to the cells. Officials ran weapon searches, tattoo examinations, and stopped mail called to all suspected gang members. After 3 days, every alleged gang member was confined to administration segregation. 10 years later, they remain there, and ADSEG has since become the automatic housing for those believed to be gang members. Bad Bob Delgado. Robert Delgado would have been thrown in ADSEG back in 1983, but he was already there for suspected gang-related stabbing back then. Delgado's Texas Syndicate tattoo was undeniable proof of his gang affiliation, but people change. Delgado, now 40, grew up in New Braunfels, Texas, a small town clean of gangs. His first run-in with the law came when he was busted for armed robbery at the age of 18. That was 1974, back in the days when the infamous building tender system was full swing and Texas joints. Chicanos, Mexicans, and other minorities had it hard under the mostly white building tender rule. After 3 years of hard punishment, Delgado became one of the original members of the building tender's arch-enemy gang, the Texas Syndicate. Back then, says Bad Bob, or Malo Delgado as he is called, we were the only ones who stood up to the building tenders. Joining the Syndicate was beautiful. It was real brotherhood back then, real carnelismo. But without the violence and oppression under the BT system, we would have never had reason to form. In 1978, Delgado finished serving his sentence. Within a year, he was back in prison for selling less than $100 worth of heroin. He was given a 35-year sentence. He has since downed 16 calendars. When he returned to the pen, Delgado saw that the Syndicate struggle against the building tenders had intensified. For every Syndicate member beaten, stabbed, or killed, 2 building tenders were treated likewise. There were less than 100 of us throughout all of Texas, says Delgado, but we had the illusion of being more because nobody could figure out exactly who was making all the moves. We were organized to fight. The Texas Syndicate and the building tenders were the only real Texas prison gangs until 1983. Without a righteous cause, the Syndicate started to go downhill. We formed an organization with the cause, says Delgado, but then it turned into a bullshit gang. 3 years ago, after nearly 2 decades of gang affiliation, Delgado called it quits. Losing a veterano like Delgado had been chairman at one time sent shockwaves throughout the Syndicate. Soon after, 6 other original members quit. Death sentences were handed down from the Syndicate's command. Delgado is not worried. The old Syndicate is dead and gone, he says. I'm dealing with the new Syndicate, which is nothing like the old. We don't call these guys gangsters. We call them punksters. Green or not, the Syndicate made a move against Delgado last year. He was walking through a cell block during his free hour when a Syndicate member attacked him. Right in front of the guard too, says Delgado, but here in Texas, guards have to wait for backup before intervening in the struggle. So this guy sounds the alarm and stands there watching. It took me about 30 seconds to knock this dude out. Then I just sat on him and waited for the guards to come to arrest us both. After about 5 minutes, he started to wake up, so I knocked him out again. The guards yelled, Delgado, don't hit him no more. But shit, he's the one who attacked me. If I didn't knock him out, I'd be dead. In the Texas system, you got to take care of yourself. 10 minutes later, Delgado was arrested and thrown into a strip cell. He says the treatment and unfair punishment he received is typical of what the TDCJ doles out to former gang members. It's all part of the program, he says. The program. Delgado will soon go to the parole board, but for the 7th time, he's been denied 6 times in the last 2 years. In fact, last year, just days before Delgado was scheduled for release, the chief of gang intelligence, Salvador Bunitello, made a special appeal to the board and they withdrew parole. It's because they still insist I'm the so-called number 2 man in the syndicate, but there's no such thing in the syndicate. The TDCJ is on a mission to blow up and keep alive the whole gang situation. Everything seems to be centered around keeping gangs empowered and members active. If you're thinking about quitting, gang intelligence is going to make you sure you don't. They'll make sure you get assaulted or they put you in an enemy cell block. They want gangs to continue. He says prison is a big business, and that includes gang intelligence. If gangs become extinct, gang intelligence become extinct, and they're not going to let that happen. Part of the TDCJ's program, he says, includes increasing, then exaggerating the numbers of gang members in Ataseg, then letting gangs and population run rampant. There are 500 people in Ataseg, I told Delgado. How many would you say are gang members? Very few, Delgado answered. A lot of guys here, Cubanos, guys from Honduras, too, who speak very or no English, are classified as gang members or guys with tattoos, and of course, former gang members. The system is very racist in Texas. Take, for instance, in Ataseg, Hispanics make up only 16% of all prisoners in Texas, yet in Ataseg, we make up 69%. Whites only make up 14% of Ataseg's prisoners, and throughout population, they total half. If that ain't ethnic cleansing, I don't know what is. Delgado is certified paralegal since 1990, doesn't sit idle in his cell. 23 hours a day, he's working on a class action suit, Robert Delgado versus the state of Syndicate, which he is filing on behalf of all former gang members against the Syndicate for their in for life clause, and against the Texas administration and gang intelligence for fostering a snitch system and for prosecuting non-cooperating former gang members. There are a lot of us who've had it with the system, says Delgado. We've had it with the gangs. Most of us veteranos with experience. In addition to Delgado, the former gang member movement also includes old-timers like David Quince Garcia, who's serving life for the murder of a syndicate member while on parole. Rogelio Indio Montes, who's serving a life sentence for killing a Mexican mafia member back in 1995. And Robert Leos, an ex-syndicate member who's doing life. The word is spreading. People are listening, says Delgado. I'll give you an example. When I got to my current pod, a 14-cell block, there were 6 current gang members. After talking to them over the course of a few weeks, I got 5 to quit. I've become a dangerous man. And that's only because I'm wielding a dangerous weapon, the truth. If only the system were on his side, according to prisoners, instead of supporting those who want to get out of gangs or those who are already declared former gang member status, the administration throws them in with current gang members. The threat of gang life, the gang's life or die membership, and the system's lack of intervention keeps current gang membership at an all-time high. The state. Salvatore Botillo is a state classification committee member with the TDCJ and a consultant on the National Institute of Corrections. He is also the chief gang intelligence officer for Texas. All through the TDCJ denied prison life. An interview with Botillo, we did find his thoughts on gangs in an article on gangs which he wrote for Corrections Today last year. He blames 3 major court decisions for the increase in gang violence. Lamar versus Cofield, which forced integration in housing areas, intensifying racial tension. Because gangs form along racial lines, writes Botillo, the decision made is easier for gang members to preach their ideology and gain more recruits. Guardo versus Estelle, which let prisoners correspond with each other in Texas, allowed gang members to use the mail system to recruit and extort, even order deaths of inmates within the system. Ruiz versus Estelle, which eliminated the building tender system. Botello agrees with Delgado that the act left a power void. But Delgado believes the increase in gang violence is exaggerated. According to Buentuelo, there were 52 homicides in 1994 and 85, more than the previous 15 years combined. But before 1995, Delgado says, there was very, very little record keeping in the Texas system. Under the building tenders, he says most homicides were being covered up as suicides, heart attacks, or accidents. And none of these suspicious accidents were being investigated. Delgado also refutes the notion that convict integration is to blame for the increase in gang activity. The Lamar case, he says, did not make recruiting easier for gangs. Recruiting was done more easily in the past in segregated environments. As for the Guardado case, appealed more to illegal mail than to prisoners correspondence, which was possible before this case. Who would need mail system anyway? So, y'all, when they move you around the system so much to control the gangs. The Department of Corrections took some severe steps. For example, any prisoner identified as to control the gangs. The Department of Corrections took some severe steps. For example, any prisoner identified as a gang member is placed in ADSEG. Any inmate caught with a weapon is slapped with the felony charge. Any prisoner convicted of a crime while incarcerated within system with severe will serve that sentence consecutively. As gang members begin receiving additional consecutive sentences, writes Botello, more and more inmates went to defect. Defectors come forward and are used as witnesses for the state against gang violence. It is the distinguished of gang intelligence officer he adds for each unit to gather information for the administrations. Again, Delgado disagrees. The gang intelligence must snitch custom requires a former gang member to incriminate himself and others before he will be labeled an ex-gang member. This circumvents the U.S. Constitution's Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Furthermore, rewarding those who snitch and punishing those who don't is criminal. It sends a message to those in gangs. Stay in, and for those who are already out of gang life, it only makes it easier for retaliatory acts against them, especially when the non-snitching former gang member is virtually surrounded by current members who have the order to take him out. Delgado and other female convicts like him are not asking for protection from the state. They merely ask for fair treatment. If these 14 cell pods could be assigned to 7 former gang members and 7 current gang members, he suggests there will be little to worry about wave gangs in Texas prisons, according to the plan. Gang members would have nobody to recruit, and then themselves might end up quitting if they knew they had that option. In for life, left Delgado? I don't think so. I don't think so, ese. Not anymore. So this is an article that was written about Robert Delgado somewhere in 1993. He's still incarcerated. He's up for parole, I think, in 2026. But they still keep on denying him because they still say he's active. But if you read his letters, his books, he's against gangs, you know, and what the Texas Syndicate has become. He's more of a political, you know, from what I get, he's more against the system, you know, more of a, like a Shea, and, you know, he's more of a political, you know, for the people, which is a good thing. So y'all drop it down, see what y'all think.